A hospital in Delhi. Early Tuesday morning. A 34-year-old woman has just died from a simple urinary tract infection. Let that sink in for a second. A urinary tract infection. The kind of thing you treat with an antibiotic prescription at any health clinic. But not this time, because the antibiotic didn't work. Neither did the second, nor the third. By the time they reached the fourth medication, it was already too late. The bacteria had won. And here's the part that will make your stomach turn. This is no longer an exception. It's the new normal. At this exact moment, while you're watching this video, someone will die from an infection that should be curable. Not because of a lack of technology, not because of a lack of doctors, but because bacteria are winning a war we thought we had won decades ago. But some people realize this before everyone else. And these people are not running to pharmacies. They are stockpiling silver. Yes, silver. The metal. You're probably thinking, wait, silver? As an investment against inflation? No, this has nothing to do with money or economics. It has to do with survival. And when you understand what these people know, you'll realize we're facing one of the greatest silent crises in modern history. Let me tell you something no one is saying out loud. There's an epidemic happening right now, but it's not the kind that shows up in newspaper headlines with daily case numbers and contagion charts. It's worse because it's invisible, it's silent, and it's killing millions of people every year without you noticing. They're the superbugs. You may have heard that word before. It probably sounded like something out of a science fiction movie. But let me give you the real numbers. In 2019, more than 1,200,000 people died directly from antibiotic-resistant infections. 1,200,000. More than died from HIV that year. More than died from malaria. And the projection for 2050? 10 million deaths per year. 10 million. That's more than cancer kills today. Now comes a question no one wants to ask out loud. Why are we losing this war? How did we get here? How is modern medicine, with all its technology and billions of dollars in research, being defeated by microscopic organisms? The answer is so obvious it hurts. Arrogance. In 1928, Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin by accident. He was hailed as a man who saved millions of lives. And he truly did. But there's a part of the story no one remembers. At the Nobel ceremony in 1945, Fleming issued a warning. He said explicitly that the excessive and incorrect use of antibiotics would create resistant bacteria. He said this would be a serious problem in the future. No one listened. Why? Because antibiotics worked so well they seemed like magic. Infections that killed people in days disappeared in a matter of hours. Medicine became so intoxicated with this victory that it did something that today seems insane. It started throwing antibiotics at everything. At viral colds that didn't even need them. Into cattle feed to make animals gain weight faster. Into soaps. Into everything. And bacteria did exactly what Fleming warned they would do. They evolved. Do you know when the last new class of antibiotics was discovered? The year 2000. 25 years ago. Since then, nothing. Zero. Meanwhile, bacteria continue to evolve with every generation. Every 20 minutes, a new generation of bacteria can emerge. They are running an evolutionary marathon while we've barely left the starting line. The result? Today, they are bacteria resistant to all known antibiotics. All of them. Patients hospitalized in ICUs with infections for which there is literally no cure. Doctors staring at a computer screen with nothing to prescribe. And this is where silver enters the story. But before I explain why, I need you to do one thing. If you're enjoying this explanation and want to understand where this is going, subscribe to the channel now and leave a like. And put in the comments which city or country you're watching from, because I need to know if this information is reaching where it needs to reach. This is far too important to stay just between us. Now come back with me to 1850 before Christ. Almost 4,000 years ago, the ancient Egyptians had a problem. Battle wounds became infected and killed more soldiers than the swords themselves. They didn't know what bacteria were. They had no microscopes. They understood nothing about microbiology. But they noticed something. When they placed silver coins on open wounds, people survived more often. Coincidence? Superstition? No. They had discovered something that science would only be able to explain almost 4,000 years later. Silver kills bacteria, and it kills them in a way that no modern antibiotic can replicate. But before I explain how, you need to understand something fundamental about antibiotics. They work like a key in a lock. Each antibiotic was developed to attack a specific point in the bacterium. Penicillin, for example, prevents a bacterium from building its cell wall. Without a wall, it dies. Simple, right? Except bacteria are not stupid. They evolve. And when you always attack the same point, eventually some bacterium is born with a mutation that protects exactly that point. That bacterium survives, reproduces, and that's it. You've created a resistant strain. It's accelerated natural selection. Darwin at maximum speed. And do you know what happens when you only have a few dozen different antibiotics, each one attacking a specific point? Bacteria eventually develop resistance to all of them. It's a matter of time, of mathematics, of basic biology. But silver works differently, completely differently. Silver doesn't attack one point. It attacks all of them at the same time. It's as if instead of key, try open a lock, you had an explosion demolishing the entire door, the walls, the ceiling, and the floor. Nothing is left. Let me break down how this works, because it's fascinating and terrifying at the same time. When silver ions come into contact with a bacterium, three things happen simultaneously. First, silver punctures the bacterial cell membrane. Imagine the membrane as the skin of the cell. Silver literally makes holes in it. The bacterium starts to leak. Its internal components spill out. It dies. Second, silver enters the cell and binds to the bacterium's DNA. It prevents it from reproducing. Even if the bacterium doesn't die immediately from leaking, it can't create copies of itself. End of the line. Third, silver creates something called reactive oxygen species inside the cell. It's basically extreme oxidative stress. It's like rusting the bacterium from the inside. It literally oxidizes and dies. 3 attacks, simultaneous, on completely different targets. Now, for a bacterium to develop resistance to silver, it would need to simultaneously develop a membrane that can't be punctured, protect its DNA from metal ions, and create an antioxidant system that works against silver. All of that at the same time, in the same generation. The statistical chances of that happening are practically zero. And that's why in 4,000 years of use, not a single case of bacterial resistance to silver has ever been documented. Zero. None. While bacteria develop resistance to modern antibiotics in months, silver continues to work exactly as it did in ancient Egypt. You might be thinking, if silver is so good, why did we stop using it? Short answer, because we found something that seemed better. In 1928, when Fleming discovered penicillin, antibiotics were easier to mass produce, easier to standardize, easier to sell. The pharmaceutical industry saw gold in a pill that could be patented and sold with huge markup. Silver? You can't patent a chemical element. You can't charge royalties on something that exists in nature. So medicine simply forgot, filed it away, treated it as if it were primitive medicine, healer stuff, ancient superstition. Hospitals that used silver instruments stopped. Treatments with silver became alternative, something only uninformed people did. But they forgot to tell the bacteria that evolve. And while medicine celebrated the age of antibiotics, bacteria were building arsenals of resistance, generation after generation, mutation after mutation, without hurry, without noise, until we started to realize infections were coming back, and this time, stronger. Surgeries that were once routine became Russian roulette. A simple cut could turn into a death sentence. Hospitals, which should be places of healing, became incubators of superbugs. The more antibiotics we used, the faster we lost a war. And that's when some people finally woke up to reality. International Space Station, 2013. NASA had a serious problem. Contaminated water. At that point, literally kilometers above Earth, astronauts were drinking water that could kill them. Bacteria were multiplying inside the purification systems. Antibiotics didn't work in zero gravity. Traditional filters clogged too quickly. The solution? Silver. NASA installed silver-coated filters throughout the station's entire water system. It worked perfectly. It still works to this day. Meanwhile, here on Earth, hospitals continued insisting on protocols that were clearly failing. The irony is brutal. The most advanced space agency on the planet was using technology that was 4,000 years old, and it worked better than anything modern medicine had to offer. But NASA wasn't alone in this rediscovery. World Health Organization, early 2000s, millions of people dying from diarrhea in poor countries because they had no access to clean water. Antibiotics were too expensive. Sanitation infrastructure would take decades to build. People were dying in the meantime. The WHO did something simple and brilliant. It distributed ceramic filters impregnated with silver. They cost a few dollars each. They didn't need electricity. They didn't need complex maintenance. They just worked. Bacteria didn't get through. End of story. The result? An 80% reduction in cases of bacterial diarrhea in the regions that received the filters. 80%, with a technology so old that pharaohs used it. And there are still people who think silver is conspiracy theory nonsense. Meanwhile, behind the scenes of modern medicine, silent panic was growing. Hospitals began to see something terrifying. Hospital-acquired infections killing more patients than the diseases that brought them there in the first place. ICUs turned into zones of microbiological warfare. The more antibiotics they used, the worse it got. That's when some hospitals began to go back in time. Silver-coated catheters, dressings with silver nanoparticles, antimicrobial fabrics in uniforms, doorknobs, handrails, surfaces all treated with silver compounds, not as a primary treatment, but as a line of defense when everything else failed. And it worked incredibly well. Infection rates dropped drastically. Patients who should have died survived. Wounds that wouldn't close began to heal. But this didn't make headlines. There was no advertising campaign. Why? Because admitting that a millennia-old solution works better than billions spent on pharmaceutical research would mean admitting we were wrong. Badly wrong. So it continued to be treated as an exotic alternative. Something hospitals did quietly but didn't advertise, as if it were shameful to admit that our ancestors knew something we forgot. But what really scared authorities was something else. Speed. In 2016, researchers discovered a bacterium in China resistant to colistin. Colistin is called the antibiotic of last resort. It's what you use when literally nothing else works. It's toxic, causes kidney damage, but at least it kills the bacteria. Or it did, because this Chinese bacterium was resistant even to colistin, and the resistance gene was on a mobile plasmid. That means the bacterium could pass this resistance to other different species, like a USB drive of evolutionary superpowers that bacteria share with each other. In 2 years, this resistance was found in 50 countries. 50 in 2 years. Do you see the speed? While it takes us long decades to develop a new antibiotic, bacteria exchange resistance genes in a matter of hours. It's like playing chess against someone who makes 10 moves while you're still thinking about the first one. We are losing. Objectively, mathematically, biologically losing. And that was the moment that changed everything. Not for official medicine, which remains trapped in protocols and committees, but for attentive people who paid attention. Preppers, survivalists, but also off-the-record doctors, veterinarians, nurses who saw the shit at the fan and decided to prepare. These smart people began stockpiling silver, not as an investment, not as jewelry, but as life insurance. Colloidal silver, homemade generators, stockpiles of pure silver coins, silver wires to make solutions, impregnated dressings, all quietly, without fanfare, because they know something most people still haven't realized. When the healthcare system finally collapses, when the next pandemic comes with bacteria resistant to everything, when hospitals have nothing left to prescribe, silver will be the difference between living and dying. And that collapse is not a question of if it will happen. It's only a question of when. So you must be wondering, what do I do with this information? First thing, understand that I'm not selling anything. I don't have a colloidal silver brand. I don't earn commissions from companies that sell filters. I'm telling you this because information is power, and shared power is collective resistance. Second thing, silver is not a magical panacea. It won't cure cancer. It won't fix diabetes. It doesn't replace serious medical treatment. But as a broad-spectrum antimicrobial, when antibiotics fail, it is literally the best option we have. Now comes the practical part. Colloidal silver is basically silver nanoparticles suspended in distilled water. You can buy it ready-made or make it at home with specific generators. The ideal concentration is between 10 and 20 parts per million. More than that brings no additional benefit and can cause argyria, that rare condition where the skin turns bluish. But here's the crucial detail no one talks about openly. Argyria only happens with completely absurd and irresponsible use. We're talking about consuming liters and liters per day for consecutive years. Occasional, rational use in emergencies, practically zero risk. The FDA does not approve colloidal silver as an official medical treatment. Obviously, because you can't patent an element of nature. You can't control something that any informed person can produce. Anyone can make it at home with basic equipment and proper knowledge. That scares the pharmaceutical industry more than any superbug. But do you know who uses it? The military, in first aid kits for special operations. Silver dressings are standard in armed forces around the world. Why? Because it works. Simple as that. You don't have to believe me. Look up studies on silver nanoparticles antimicrobial. You'll find hundreds of peer-reviewed papers showing effectiveness against MRSA, resistant E. coli, Pseudomonas, all the superbugs that are killing people right now. The question is not whether it works. The question is why we're not using it on a large scale. And the answer is always the same: money. A treatment with the latest generation antibiotic can cost thousands of dollars. Colloidal silver? Cents per dose. Literally cents. There's no way to build $1 billion pharmaceutical empire on something that costs cents. So they prefer to develop antibiotics that are increasingly expensive, increasingly toxic, which bacteria will inevitably overcome. And the cycle continues. Patients die. Profits rise. But something is changing. Silently. People waking up to reality. Honest doctors starting to question protocols. Nurses using silver on wounds that won't heal. Veterinarians treating resistant infections in animals. Results appearing. It won't make headlines. There won't be a government campaign. But it's happening. And the more people know, the harder it becomes to hide. Now the moral lesson of all this. And pay attention because it's important. True progress is not a straight upward line. Sometimes, truly moving forward means honestly looking back and humbly recognizing that our ancestors knew important things we forgot, not because of their ignorance, but because of our arrogance. Modern medicine saved millions. Antibiotics were a genuine revolution, but we became slaves to our own innovation. We assume new is always better, that old is primitive, and in that arrogance, we discarded solutions that worked. Bacteria have no ego. They don't care about prestige or patents. They just want to survive. And they're winning because we underestimated nature. Silver teaches us humility. It teaches that simple solutions are sometimes the best. That not everything needs to be complex to be effective. That ancestral knowledge deserves respect, not contempt. And most importantly, it teaches that we cannot depend entirely on centralized systems. Hospitals will fail. Medicines will run out. Supply chains will break. But knowledge is something you always carry with you. Knowing how to use silver to purify contaminated water, treat an infected wound, prevent a serious bacterial infection, that is real, genuine power. Power no one can take from you. That doesn't depend on a pharmacy, a doctor, or a government. So if you're enjoying this conversation, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment which city or country you're watching from. Because we need to spread this. We need more people to know. The next pandemic will come. Superbugs will continue to evolve. The system will eventually collapse. The only question is, will you be prepared or will you be just another statistic? Silver is not about money. It's about survival. And now you know.